And thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us once again across the Louisiana plain, where we are elevating the cause of constitutional conservatism in Louisiana, elevating the cause of constitutional conservative citizens across the state, and rapidly now draining the Louisiana swamp. My name is Chris.
And I'm Danielle, and this is the State of Freedom, brought to you by freedom-loving Louisiana First Patriots. Hello, State of Freedom warriors. Thank you for inviting us to be part of your day. We are so grateful for you. You're the best listening family anyone could possibly hope for, and we are only here because of your encouragement, your prayers, and your financial support. If you are looking for a way to support us, to advertise with us, or to send us feedback, please visit our website at freedomstate.us. We'd really appreciate it if you'd also help us get the word out and spread the reach of the State of Freedom. Please like the show on whatever platform you listen to us, subscribe to it, and share it. You can share short clips instead of the full episodes from our YouTube and Rumble channels, and links to those are always in the show notes and over on freedomstate.us. Today we have joining us a friend of the show, a patriot. It's Representative Raymond Crews. We're so thrilled to have him. Before we bring him on, let me read the scripture of the day. It's Proverbs chapter 3, verses 21 and 22. And it says, "My child, never drift off course from these two goals for your life, to walk in wisdom and to discover your purpose. Don't ever forget how they empower you, for they strengthen you inside and out and inspire you to do what is right. You'll be energized and refreshed by the healing they bring." And we've talked about this before on the show, but the two most important things that we must get right in our lives are a right view of God and a right view of self. And when we align our thinking so that in our view, God is literally who he says he is, and we are living in the identity and purpose he's given us, moving toward and becoming who he made us to be, we will be inspired to do what's right. We will be energized with a fresh wind, and those broken parts of our soul where we had identity wrong, or where we've been hurt or by wrong thinking or by things people have said or done to us in the past, those parts of us will be healed. So let that be an encouragement and a reminder to you today.
And let's keep our eyes on the Lord, Danielle. Let's keep our eyes on him and recognize that his ways are not always our ways. And sometimes when we go through difficulties, it's really so we can be tested. It's a test of faith. As James said, it builds endurance, it builds fidelity, and ultimately we'll get the crown. And speaking of someone who knows what it feels like to go through difficulty in the legislative process and ultimately emerge victorious, it's such a joy to have Representative Raymond Crews here with us today. How are you, Raymond?
I'm doing great. Thanks. As a matter of fact, what you just said about a right view of ourself, I think is equally important. Yesterday, I realized, hey, I can't do this, Lord. You just guide me what to say, what to do, and I'll seek your will. And at the end of it, I had a peace. Even though the vote was 16-2, I was like, hey, I carried out my end of it. I know you can do things I can't, and I don't understand sometimes the way you do them, but I had peace with that. And amazing thing to me later that evening, I was in the office at 11:30 and doing my personal work. And all of a sudden I got this message about one of my deadlines, because I've got this deadline of the 31st of March that was approaching rapidly. And I was way behind because I'm not getting the information from clients in time. And then I got a note saying, hey, that deadline's been extended to May 31st. And I just praise God that, hey, you're looking out for me when my time seems to be restricted and I can't do anything on my own. He's still able to do it. He's still able to break down those barriers. So I was very thankful.
That's amazing.
It is amazing. And it's so powerful. Rep Crews, I've got to start by asking you about House Bill 714. I want to tell you, I wasn't there. I was actually traveling back from Florida with my family, but we had it propped up right there on the dashboard. I was trying to keep my eyes on the road, but I was so impressed by the way you explained the legislation, by the way you respond to the questions. I was so impressed by Treasurer Fleming and how he explained it, and former Representative Jenkins. It was clearly obvious to me that y'all understand deeply the issue here about making gold and silver transactional in Louisiana. for the benefit of our listeners, explain what your legislation will do and why it is so important for our citizens.
Sure, I'd love to. Matter of fact, let me talk about the beginning of it. I read a book. It was called Pirate Money, and it talked about this concept, and I was very intrigued with it. Of course, the most intriguing part to me is the mention in our Constitution, Article 1, Section 10, that says, hey, states can use gold and silver as currency. There's no prohibition against that. So in the book, it explains, well, why aren't we doing that? Well, I mean, it's fairly obvious. You can't go to Bass Pro Shop with a gold bar and say, I want that new boat back there. They're just not going to do it for you. It's not transactional. It's not useful day to day. So the book laid out the case quite well, I thought, that, hey, if we could make this transactional, then it meets the requirements of currency, which means it has to be legal, which it already is by the Constitutional, and it has to be functional. It has to be transactional, and you use it day to day. And with today's technology, we can do that. I mean, you use a debit card or credit card probably every day. I rarely see cash. I use it for tips sometimes and whatnot, but I rarely need cash, even though that debit card represents the cash in the background. So extend that to gold. You don't need to see the gold and silver. You can have possession of it. And then electronically, you can use that gold and silver and transact business with other people, other merchants or whatnot. So the key to this is that we're in the digital era, and it makes this all possible. Matter of fact, there are about 25 states that are looking into this idea. And it's fantastic that it's all coming together like this. But there are about 9 states that actually have legislation on the books where they're pursuing this idea. There are a couple that have already been through committee and are headed to the floor. And then there's one that already has a depository, our neighbor, Texas. And then there's one that's actually used $140 million worth of gold to secure their rainy day fund. So you can see there are players around the country realizing, hey, this is a right granted, afforded to us through the Constitution. And I think we ought to take advantage of it. Now, what we were seeking to do in this bill is say, listen, it's hard to pass bills that cost money. How can we do this and institute a system at minimum cost so that the residents of Louisiana and actually throughout this country can use this easily? And we said, well, let's use one of these platforms that's already out there to buy gold and silver. And the one I was familiar with was Glint, Glint. And you can buy gold there for 0.5% charge on that purchase and then have it saved in a depository. Now, since we're all here in Louisiana, we wanted that depository to be nearby. And the one that came to mind was this Texas State Bullion Depository, which is near Austin, not far away. Yes, it's not Louisiana, but like I said, we're trying to minimize costs on startup. And then if you use those two things together and have the treasurer audit the program through the legislative auditor, make sure the gold's there or whatnot, and then use a local bank to issue a debit card to where you can access that gold, you got the whole system for, we're talking a cost of maybe $200,000 a year. That's de minimis in the state budget.
Representative Crews, they spent more than that on one of the football stadiums when they exceeded the spending cap last year.
Oh, you bet. And on top of all this, these firms that do this, the gold purchasing, everything's paid for through fees, 2-3%, whatever they charge. And they were willing to give us a share of that in the state of Louisiana so we could have transactions carried on by people in Oklahoma, Arkansas, Montana, whatever. And we would get a portion of those proceeds to maybe lower our tax burden here in Louisiana and fund some of the projects we think are important. So I just saw this as a win all the way around. I saw it as a win for the banks to be able to collect these transaction charges. I mean, to be the first and declare it as currency, which, by the way, I haven't mentioned, by it being currency, it escapes capital gains taxes because now it's not a commodity, it's actually currency. Now, the bankers did bring up the point that, well, that would probably be tested. Well, sure, isn't everything tested at some point in the legal system? But it's right there in the Constitution. A plain reading says, hey, it's currency. It can't be taxed like that. So I just thought this was a fantastic piece of legislation to help everybody. And the treasurer, when it was explained to him, I'll tell you what, Dr. Fleming, he is a smart man. And he actually picked this up in no time. And what he really saw this for is, we have a wealth gap. Whenever we have some hyperinflation period, what happens? The rich do get richer. And it's not because of some nefarious thing. It's just the way the system is. If you can buy real estate, you can have some possessions that will inflate their prices the same rate as inflation. You can stay, even, or in some cases, you can have assets that appreciate more than inflation. You can actually come out better on the other side. But the regular day wage earner, the one that's living paycheck to paycheck, they don't have that opportunity. So what happens? They get poor. That value of the dollar decreases and they have less capability to buy what they need to survive when hyperinflation or even moderate inflation comes by. So this is a way that any citizen could purchase gold at minimal charge and have that as a hedge against inflation. And we could all be better off by having that when we have those hard times come, and they will come. And I just thought that was fantastic. I was glad he picked up on it right away. And we thought, well, let's take this to Louisiana. If we can be first, that's huge, because I guarantee you, if we had this in Louisiana, people from Texas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, whatever, would be getting debit cards, transacting their business and whatnot through those debit cards. We'd be collecting part of that fee. The banks would be collecting part of that fee. It'd be better for everybody. So the thing is, I mentioned in committee, I cannot imagine a player coming up to Kim Mulkey and say, hey, can we go for second this year? It just doesn't make sense.
Exactly.
You either win or you lost.
I remember you making that point very, very clearly toward the close of your presentation. I thought it was brilliant.
But that's what one of the bankers said. They were like, well, why do we have to be first? And we're like, you've got to be kidding me. There's 25 states pursuing this. We just happen to be in session right now. Let's take advantage of all these parts in place. And let's be number one. Let's do something first for a change.
Yeah, for a change. And you mentioned that this would not be subject to capital gains tax. And one of the legislators seemed to really be upset by that. that we would not be paying our fair share in capital gains tax. I took offense to that personally.
Well, whenever we have inflation, the government's really taking some of your money.
Yeah.
They're the ones printing it. They're making what you do have less valuable. So they're already taking it there. So to be able to keep your money certainly shouldn't be taxed.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and of course, you already paid tax on it before you invested it, just to be clear to
That's
everyone.
right.
Thank you. So just to kind of tag on to what Chris was saying, the hearing was super well attended yesterday. There was an overflow room. And I thought, just as Chris said, you and our state treasurer, John Fleming, did a fantastic job of making the presentation, standing up, answering a lot of questions, some of which were not, did not reflect very well on our legislators. And honestly, some of the questions posed, I think, really did expose a lack of understanding of the mechanics of the bill and perhaps even basic economics. But you mentioned they voted it down 16-2. It completely blew me away that happened, because I thought, the citizens are here. We're supporting this bill. It's very clear that this is going to help the people of Louisiana. It's going to help the bottom line of the state of Louisiana. What's your take on how the hearing went? And are our legislators completely beholden to the bankers?
No, I wouldn't say that at all. I would say, first of all, that although I do think this would benefit Louisiana greatly, my primary reason is, hey, it's a right granted by the Constitution or recognized by the Constitution. Why in the world would we prevent the people from taking advantage of the right? They may not do it, but if that's something they have in the Constitution, why not grant it and make the facility, facilitate them being able to take advantage of that right? That's number one. Yes, I would think Louisiana would benefit, and I think we could benefit greatly. But the number one is it's a right. So the bankers, I will say right off the bat, I do think they're scared. This is Louisiana. We don't like being first in things. New things can be very intimidating. And I think that was number one, upsets the status quo. But when I try to look deeper and figure out, well, what are the reasons? Because they didn't seem to focus at all the times I brought them on the transaction charge. I think they can make significant revenue with a transaction charge. And if they believe that many people are going to take advantage of it, why would you not pursue that opportunity? So the only thing that really makes sense to me is they are a little bit, concerned about people's perception of fractional reserve systems. And that's something I don't think a lot of people have thought about frequently. And that's the fact that when you put your $10 in the bank, they're maybe loaning out 9 of them. So you really only have one still on deposit there. And if everybody were to go to the bank, like's happened, historically, that money's not there. It's loaned out. And I don't know if that's what they're most worried about, or they just don't understand all the mechanics. But their complaint, one of them was that we're trying to become a state bank. And I think if you read the bill and you read the amendments, you see that's not true at all. All the treasurer is doing is facilitating this option for the people, this choice for the people, and being a custodian to make sure it happens responsibly. That's it. There are no services, no loaning, nothing of the sort. And then they function on where the depository was. Yes, we'd love to have one here right in Louisiana, but Texas has already spent the money. They're our next door neighbor. They do a lot of things well. Why would we not trust them while the program's getting up on its wheels and getting running? They focused on the fact that hey, transactions may not be charged here, through a fee. It may be some other bank. We can definitely negotiate that. We can definitely keep those transaction fees in Louisiana. I thought that was not a valid reason to oppose it. Let's see, some other things they brought up was who the author of the book is, and it's only his one book. I'm like, really? We should argue these issues on their merits, not always appeal to authority and whatnot and get off track and throw out red herrings. Let's talk about the actual mechanics and what the purpose is and what the Constitution says.
Yeah. And Raymond, what an absolutely ridiculous thing to say. I'm so glad you brought that up. And I remember there, I watched him say that. Well, this is just one guy in one book. Of course, Treasurer Fleming had said at least twice that many experts agree with the merits of your position and the merits of your legislation. It's not just one author. It's not just one book. So I thought that was a little bit disingenuous for the bankers to suggest that all of this is hinging on one guy and one book. But I'm very intrigued by a point you made a minute ago, that apart from whether or not this will benefit the citizens of Louisiana economically, the Constitution, Article 1, Section 10, clearly authorizes the states to do this. So to that degree, it is a right. And so is it your suggestion here, and it sounds like it is, that the legislature is sort of statutorily impeding or obstructing the exercise of what is really a fundamental constitutional right?
I think the primary purpose of government is to secure your rights. And yes, I think we need to make sure we do facilitate that option for people. And by not doing so, we are getting in the way. So yes, I agree with your point there.
And Rep. Crews, has Governor Landry weighed in on this bill? Have you had the opportunity to talk to him about it?
Not him personally. I have talked with members of his staff. They are functioning on particular things, education, crime, and whatnot, maybe a constitutional convention. So this was not on their radar. I'll admit I didn't know about it until, I think the first session had already started. So I mentioned it to them. They had members attend yesterday. They're intrigued by it, but I don't know, given the focus they already have, whether or not they're going to come on board in the way that I hope. But they're neutral at this point. But I would love to see Governor Landry say, hey, you know what? This is good for everybody. I want to go ahead and lend my support as well.
Yeah, and I would we would love to see that too. And fortunately, we're not elected representatives, so I can make the observation that I'm about to make. As much as I respect Governor Landry and supported him, I find it somewhat difficult to fathom, that he could be at least somewhat supportive of the takeover of our healthcare system in the state of Louisiana, but yet not come forward and support something that is so promising and put his weight behind it. I find that rather disappointing. And I hope that he will come forward and support the legislation, and it probably would have made a difference. But I want to ask you this, Representative Crews, right now, as you speak to our listeners here, what should citizens be doing? What should LeCag be doing? What should other advocacy groups be doing? I'm talking about ordinary citizens across the state to support the legislation, to facilitate its passage.
Well, you're doing it right now. So people have to be made aware. I'll admit that several times I've been on radio, had interviews, had things written, and it's the first time people have really considered this argument. So it's good to get the word out there. And I would say that is probably number one, because, with a groundswell of support of any kind of idea, concept, it actually gives those legislators that are either waffling or a little unsure or whatever, it gives them the support they need to be able to tell their friend, the banker, the guy they go golfing with, that, hey, I love you, brother. I want you to make a good living. I think you're still going to make a good living, but my constituents everywhere are telling me they want this. I can't deny that to them. So sometimes they just need that, and that's where y'all fit in. And I think you're doing a great job of that. And I think if we continue the media press here and getting this out there, that they'll be more confident knowing, you know what, I think it's a good idea. I don't see where my banker friends have a problem with it, but I'm getting requests over and over to support it. And I think that's going to be what makes the difference, because anybody has more courage when they have people behind them. And that's what we need to do, is get more people behind the idea. So when people are saying, you know what, I'd like to vote for this, they have that support they need and they don't have the worry.
Yeah, that's a great point. Based on what you've seen, Representative Crews, is there any doubt in your mind at this point that a majority of Louisiana citizens are in favor of this idea?
Not at all. Matter of fact, I have not had a single individual have a problem. And matter of fact, they're all enthusiastic. One had a little question about the constitutionality, and I answered that. But other than that, everybody's been behind it. It's only the bankers. And I don't, I hate to think anybody would be nefarious, and I don't think they are. I think they're just worried. A new concept scare people easily. And I think this one they can get behind, because once again, we're just ensuring a right. The state is not conducting any business, any transactions in this. They're not trying to get bank business, nothing of the sort. They're just trying to make sure we have a framework set up for people to realize this and transact with gold and silver if they like, hedge against inflation, whatever. They don't have to do it. The banks don't have to support it, but it's coming. And if it comes in another state first, well, guess what? Those ones you were worried about taking their deposits out, they're going to do it, but they're going to do it with some other bank in another state. And that's a sad position to be in. I still don't think it's going to be to the level that it's going to hurt their business. But if you were worried about it at all, you should have been worried about passing it here so we wouldn't have people taking their business to other states. That's for certain.
Well said. Well said. And it's interesting, Representative Crews, that it seems like we have no problem being distinguished for our failures in the state of Louisiana, but we have a real hard time occasionally being distinguished by our successes. And it's unfortunate. And you are making every effort to create something that will allow us to be distinguished for something great and good. And we applaud you for that, and applaud you for your leadership on this. And we just want to let you know that we are building a coalition across the state that supports your legislation, and we're going to continue to support it. And from what I'm understanding through our exceedingly effective grapevine, and perhaps you can confirm this legislation is by no means dead.
That's for certain. I've already heard several people say things I haven't even mentioned, and I'm like, yeah, that's a possibility. So legislation, although it seems dead at times, can come back in different ways, different shapes, different forms, different presenters even. So I would say keep up that groundswell support, keep pushing for it, give your representatives and senators the encouragement they need to know, hey, I can be behind this because my people are behind it. So I think you just keep moving that. There's several different avenues, like I said, we can take. I don't know which one is going to be the successful one or how it's going to exactly unfold. But first of all, I just want to keep the people informed and have them thinking about this and having them pressure their legislators. So whatever form it comes back in, or in its same form in a different manner, that they'll be more confident in voting for it.
Yeah, great. And the people
Amen.
deserve the option. I think that's what, Chris and I were discussing before we came on air. This is not forcing anything on anyone. This is giving the people an option that they deserve to have to be able to protect their future wealth, to be able to protect their family and diversify their own earnings.
Then there was a lot of comment about that, like almost like we need to protect the people from themselves.
Yes.
I'm like, you know what? If they make this decision, yes, they should be informed. And yeah, maybe put a disclaimer, but I think most people know when you buy gold, there is a little bit of risk, but it's really, like I've said before, it's not the value of the gold that you're worried about. It's the dollar. When the gold goes up, that means the dollar's worth less. When the gold goes down, it means the dollar's worth more. So you've still got to be judicious in what you're going to do. But over the long haul, gold is going to be a good store of value.
That's right. And Representative Crews, I was listening to Representative Reiser, who I've known for a long time, and I like him genuinely as a person. And I'm sitting there listening to him, and the bulk of his objection is that people's capital gains may go up. This may not eliminate their capital gains tax. And I'm like, well, as you said, I mean, nothing is completely risk free. And as long as you provide the information and allow people to assess the risks, allow them to make their own decision. I mean, the last time I checked, this is not a big brother government. This is a government of individual freedom and individual sovereignty. And we are allowed to succeed in a free society, and we are allowed to fail in a free society.
What's funny about that argument, too, is if you're going to be subject to capital gains, what does that mean has happened? The gold is appreciated.
Exactly.
You've made some money. You've made some money. Hello. Yeah. I mean, that's a great point. Great point. Well, what a pleasure to have you with us here today, Representative Crews. And I know Danielle joins me in just telling you how grateful we are for your leadership, not just on this legislation, but on a number of other great things you've done. I want to reiterate the fact that I thought the way you and Treasurer Fleming and former Representative Jenkins, the issue and the legislation could not have been presented any more effectively or any more clearly. I was thinking that while you were talking. I'm like, this is absolutely a stellar presentation. There's no way this committee is going to vote against this bill. That's kind of what I was thinking.
Let me give my kudos to the Treasury Department and Secretary Fleming or Treasurer Fleming. They did a fantastic job because they facilitated several meetings with bankers, with the author of the book, with some legislators, several different people over, I would say, the course of somewhere between 12 and 20 hours. I mean, it was very in-depth. And I'm very thankful for them and what they were able to put together. Unfortunately, we couldn't get everybody on the same page on this, but it wasn't like they were just trying to pass this in the night and have nobody know. They involved the players. They tried to get their opinions on ways to make this work and whatnot. So kudos to them. And thanks so much to Treasurer Fleming for pursuing this. He did a great job. And yeah, I think it was clearly represented. And I think when the people understand the opportunity, what's out there and what they could have, I think they're going to go for it. And I did want to add one more thing on the liquidity thing. This will be, with this gold and silver currency, will be the first time the average person can put some money away and have it liquid in case things don't go their way and they have some emergency, a medical incident, a car breakdown. It's not like they have to go to the broker, pay some fees, wait some time, and finally get the money. It's a debit card. They can use it instantly. So while we would hope they would be able to save for the long haul, maybe they can't. And when you're strapped, that's more often than not, you can't just save it for a long time. So this would give them the liquidity they need to be able to hedge and not have those kind of pitfalls.
And that's what you mean when you say transactional, right?
Mm-hmm. That's exactly correct. You can use it in an instant. It's not the old gold and silver where you put it under your bed and, hope you never had to use it. But then when you do need to use it, it may be a challenge.
Yeah. Well, God bless you, Representative Crews. It's a great pleasure to have you. We will obviously be following the legislation and we'll be praying for you going forward.
Well, let me just tell you and your listeners, the work y'all put out there and the way you influence legislatures will largely determine what the next steps are. So we can feel the temperature. We know the tempo. We know what people are thinking by what kind of pressure is put on them, both positive, hopefully mainly positive, but sometimes negative. We can feel that, and that can often guide our decisions on what next step to take.
Well, we're in your corner, and we only know one speed, and that's about 100. That's about 100 miles an hour. We're from North Louisiana. You know that. You know how that is, Rep. Crews.
Of course.
So anyway, have a great evening, sir, and thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah.
Thank you both, and thanks to all of the listeners and the ones taking an active role in government in Louisiana.
Yes, sir.
Thanks.
Thank you, Rep. Crews. I'm excited to share a fantastic opportunity for State of Freedom listeners who are interested in investing in precious metals or even starting a home-based business in the precious metals industry. Metal Stacks is a precious metals collectors club where you can buy your metals at the best prices on the market, actual dealer cost. They are beating the big sites. They have no credit card fees and no minimums. If you're just interested in purchasing metals at a great price, visit metalstacks.com/dwalker. Get to shopping. That helps me out. I get the commission. You can also refer people to Metal Stacks for an additional income. If you're interested in learning about the referral business aspect of Metal Stacks, email me directly at Danielle@freedomstate.us for more information. Chris, I love that Louisiana stands to be a leader in something. I just am so grateful that Representative Crews has the foresight and the vision to want to bring this kind of legislation to Louisiana that brings freedom to the people. It brings some financial freedom. It brings some financial stability at times, at a time when inflation is through the absolute roof.
It's so interesting to me that John Locke said many, many years ago, the philosopher on whom our Declaration of Independence and Constitution largely were founded, and he said that government almost by nature is adverse to the interests of freedom and to the interests of people, because in order for government to exist, it necessarily requires the surrender of a degree of individual freedom so that people can exist together in a civilized society. And so once you surrender even a portion of your freedom to government, it's as though there is on some level forever a cross current of friction and conflict between the government and individuals. And I thought that is what was at work yesterday in the committee room. I just was astounded, Danielle, by the degree to which these committee members, largely Republican, could hear a presentation as clear as was made by Representative Crews, by Treasurer Fleming, by former Representative Jenkins about the importance of this being able to use gold and silver as transactional currency in Louisiana and how it will revolutionize the way business is done in this state. And then to have that many Republicans, ask so many incredibly stupid questions that were already answered and already explained in the presentation, and then vote against this legislation. If there's ever an example of elected representatives falling in with special interests and betraying the interests of the citizens who voted for them and elected them, this legislation is that example. This legislation is that case.
I didn't think we were going to see such a strong opposition to this bill, Chris. I really thought it was so straightforward and so brilliant that the legislators would see that. It makes you feel naive in hindsight, right, to say something like that. But I really just thought that they would say, wow, this is good for me and my family, too. At least be self-interested in that way.
This is a constitutional right. You're exactly right, Danielle. Not only will it potentially benefit ordinary citizens across the state, but it is constitutional. Gold and silver, the Constitution authorizes states to use gold and silver as tender, as transactional currency. Article 1, Section 10 of the Constitution. It is a right. And Representative Crews mentioned on the show that, obviously we want this to benefit economically citizens in Louisiana, but the primary motive for me in bringing the legislation is that it is a constitutional right to transact in gold and silver if you want to. It is specifically written in the Constitution. And for a committee to statutorily obstruct the exercise of a constitutional right, to me, is abysmal. It's just horrible. And, let me ask you this. Why do you think it is that they did not support the legislation? I want your opinion.
Well, Look, I didn't know exactly what was behind some of that, but from what it sounds like from Representative Crews, he spent the time with each of the committee members explaining it. So it seems like if they had real objections to it, that was their opportunity to bring it up, not in the committee hearing grandstanding like some of them did, which I found just to be, frankly, quite disrespectful. A lot of them asked the same questions that had already been asked and answered and previously answered in the original presentation of the bill. I just don't know what else they want other than to look like they're fighting for the little people while fighting for special interests. That's what really went on.
That's exactly what went on here. I know you mentioned during the show, Danielle, but I just want to remind our listeners that there was an overflow room down there yesterday. An overflow room, which means that citizens from all over the place were there supporting this legislation. And there were advocacy groups like ours who were on record supporting it. And the only opposition was these two bankers representing the banking cartel in the state of Louisiana. And yet our committee members and Representative Crews said, what about what your constituents want, not what the special interests want? And that's the big problem. They're not focused on what their constituents want. They're focused on the big special interests, I guess, because they believe that their political longevity will be assured if they cater to those big special interests instead of to the citizens.
It will not. I guarantee you it will not. That's not the way you treat your constituents and stay in your role. That's not the way to do it.
No, it's not. It's absolutely not. And it's actually infuriating, that they would cave in that way and make that decision. But on the other hand, it is great affirmation for why we exist and why we were formed, because LeCag was formed to fight for the Louisiana citizens against precisely the type of nefarious influence that we saw yesterday that caused Republicans to vote in such a large majority against a very, very good common sense piece of legislation. By the way, Danielle, Representative McCormick told me yesterday that in his view, this is the most important piece of legislation that's been presented in our legislature since he has been in the legislature, which is many years.
I'm so glad you brought up Representative McCormick, because I was about to just say that we would be remiss if we didn't talk for a moment about how compelling his line of questioning was, how informed he sounded as a committee member. He really brought some great points out that were bolstering the argument for this legislation. And I just really have to say how much I appreciate him and how much I appreciate what he brought to the table yesterday.
That's a great point, Danielle. What Danny McCormick told me yesterday when I was talking to him, he kind of explained the way it works. He said, for every dollar that's deposited into a bank, the bank apparently is able to loan out $10. So, and they have a mechanism where basically they print their own money and they're able to loan 10 times the amount of money out that they actually have on deposit in the bank and loan it out with significant interest. And that's how obviously they make their money. And
I think Representative Crews made such a great point on that this afternoon. He said that the bankers must be afraid that if people really understood how banks work, they would take their money out. Well, that is true. We would take our money out if we had another option, if we actually did a good job in schools of teaching people how the banks worked.
Yes, and based upon your earlier comments, Danielle, based upon the astute, trenchant, well-studied questions from the Republican committee members yesterday, I'm sure that you were reassured about their level of understanding and education in the transactional exchange of gold and silver in Louisiana, were you not?
They weren't even sure how a debit card worked. I'm sorry. It was embarrassing. It was very embarrassing. And I hope they have an opportunity to redeem themselves. I really do hope they have the opportunity to redeem themselves. Look, our listeners know, Chris, that I am a huge fan of gold and silver. So I think we should absolutely be, whether or not this passes, we need to be investing in gold and silver to protect ourselves. But this would make life so much easier. This would make life so much, he called it transactional gold and silver. It would be a lot more liquid. People would be able to buy groceries in gold and silver. That is a beautiful thing. And just as people have started transitioning away from the dollar in certain segments of society to move to crypto, move to Bitcoin, and people are even choosing to get paid in alternative currencies like Bitcoin, this could open up the door to people choosing to get paid in gold and silver or exchanging their fiat dollars, which are losing value every second, for gold and silver. So I guess, look, I understand if the bankers are worried, but maybe they should just get on the right side of this issue. If your ship is sinking, get out.
If your ship is sinking, get out and just make sure that your life raft doesn't have any holes in it.
That's it.
That's what we should be on the point. The last point I want to make on all of this, Danielle, on this bill, is that we live in a society that facilitates freedom and sovereignty. We live in a society that allows people to make both good decisions or bad decisions, that allows people to succeed and allows people to fail. And that is what freedom and liberty are all about. And some of these questions that I heard yesterday, it was almost as though they viewed their role as big brother government, both to control and in their own mind protect Louisiana citizens from their own choices. And I think it does a great disservice to our intelligence, and it really does a great disservice to liberty. As Representative Crews said, dealing in gold and silver on a transactional basis, being able to buy and sell with gold and silver is in the Constitution. The states have the constitutional authority to coin it, and it is unfortunate that our legislature, a legislative committee yesterday, stood in the way of legislation that would further facilitate human liberty, human freedom, and really the letter and the spirit of the United States Constitution. That's what I find so sad about all of this in a 16-2 vote. But it's not over. It is not over. And as Representative Crews said, there are other tactics and opportunities to push the legislation forward. And the most important thing that our listeners can do is to do the calls to action on the LeCag website. Overwhelm them, flood them with emails and phone calls. Make your voices heard. We are the boss, as John F. Kennedy said, and we will get the government we demand and deserve. But Danielle, if people don't do it, then we're not going to win the legislation. It's that simple. We can win if we do what we need to do to win, and we will lose if we don't. It's that simple.
It is that simple. And a couple tips to the listeners. One is please personalize each action that you send out, each call to action. If you have time, just add one sentence to the front of the email, because those are more likely to get looked at. It doesn't look like it's a form email, and it will get their attention. So that's one. The other is you can do, if there's a piece of legislation that you're really passionate about, you can do that call to action once a day from the LeCag website. The system doesn't let you do it more than once a day unless like if it moves from committee to the House or something and it has a different target, then you can do it more than once a day. But usually it's one time a day you can do a particular action. So if you are feeling really hot under the collar about this issue or any other issue that we bring to your attention or that you're aware of from your own following of the legislature, go to the LeCag website every day and look at what it is. The stuff that's at the top is what's moving right now. And so you can prioritize that. And then take a look at what is meaningful to you, what you want your legislator to move on, and take action that way.
So to be clear, Danielle, you're saying that let's just say House Bill 714. A person can go on and do the call to action one day and then can go on and do essentially the same cause of action on the same bill the next day.
Yes, exactly.
Okay. Yeah.
You can do it once a day. And look, there's plenty of reasons that you would be in support of this bill. So just say, maybe make a little list while you're busy being angry about it. Make a little list, and every day just put another reason at the front of your email. I thought about another reason you need to support this bill, legislator so-and-so. Yeah. And like you said, we will overwhelm them with strong, positive pressure to get this done.
To get it done, and we will.
For the people.
To the people. And let us remember, they serve us. We do not serve them. Danielle, it's such a great pleasure to be with you as always. It seems like the time just flies by. We're going to have to do something to put this thing in slow motion because I was so much fun. I never want it to end. But I do want to say before we go how appreciative I am of our State of Freedom listeners, how inspired I am by how rapidly we are growing and building and becoming the voice of constitutional freedom in Louisiana. It's such a humble honor to be in the position that we are in, growing and developing and being a trusted voice for the citizens across the state. And God knows they need it, particularly based upon what we saw yesterday, but not to end on a negative note.
No, we won't end on a negative note. We'll end on a very positive note. If people would like to support the State of Freedom, they can do that at freedomstate.us or at the P.O. Box 861, Berg, Louisiana 70343. And just a reminder, if you haven't caught the episode before this one with General Flynn, what an absolute honor. Speaking of honors, having the opportunity to interview him. We're also, as if you did listen to it, you may have heard, we are affiliate partners with General Flynn's movie, Flynn, Deliver the Truth, Whatever the Cost. And if you are interested in supporting General Flynn and the State of Freedom, you can go to freedomstate.us and you can buy the movie through our link on the website, and we will get a piece of that, which would help us out a lot. So please do that, and we would really, really appreciate it. He's also going on tour, so take a look and see if there's any cities that are interesting for you. There's none in the state of Louisiana, but we, Chris, intend to be in Jackson. So if people want to make a plan to come and meet us in Jackson at the one on May 25th. It would be a lot of fun to see State of Freedom listeners, LCAG members in Jackson. Maybe we can all plan to get a burger before.
I'm absolutely thrilled about it, Danielle. I'm just thrilled about General Flynn, and I'm just very inspired by his movie. And I would encourage everyone to go to freedomstate.us and get the movie. As you said, it helps us out. Helps us sustain our effort, and obviously you're contributing to the cause of an extraordinary American, one of the great Americans to come along in the last 40 or 50 years. What courage, what heart, what inspiration. Well, Danielle, if we continue each day as we did today and every day to do what Rudyard Kipling says, which is to fill the unforgiving minute with 60 seconds worth of distance run, we will succeed. We will not only survive, we will prevail, we will conquer, and we will take another step each day to preserve the great state of freedom in Louisiana.
Amen. Thanks, Chris.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to The State of Freedom. To stay on top of all the calls to action we mentioned today, just check out the show notes for the episode. If you'd like to support the show financially, visit our website at freedomstate.us. If you'd prefer to give by mail, you can send a check to the State of Freedom, LLC, at P.O. Box 861, Berg, Louisiana 70343. If you own a business in Louisiana and are interested in supporting our show by advertising, please email us at info@freedomstate.us. To get involved with Louisiana Citizen Advocacy Group, visit lacag.org, LACAG.org, or email Chris at chris@lacag.org. If you're enjoying the podcast, please subscribe and share it. Give us a 5-star rating in the reviews. Thanks again, everybody. We'll see you next time.